A little bit of backstory. My neighborhood has recently had a series of break-ins, ranging from cars getting broken into in broad daylight at our neighborhood pool to having people's garages broken into. This isn't an unusual occurrence, as some sort of break-ins usually happens every summer. Recently, a house in the back of my neighborhood was targeted, but luckily they had a security camera set up in the corner of their garage. The family sent the video to the neighborhood watch, who then sent it to basically everyone in the neighborhood with the title Carpet Creeper. The video is pretty unsettling because you see a tall, lanky, older looking man walk up from the dark into the open air carpet. He was wearing a hat and sunglasses, even though it's pitch black outside. In the video, he walks with his back to the car and runs his hands along the car. He then walks around to the other side of the car and does the same thing, where he runs his back alongside it. Then you see him walk near the side door to the house, bend down and sort of crawl on the ground. He lingered in the carpet for around 8 minutes just walking around and touching things, and all he ended up stealing was a pair of nice tennis shoes from the homeowner left outside their house. So flash forward to tonight. My house has an open air carpet with a security light that is supposed to flash on when someone walks underneath it. With this being said, it's incredibly old and doesn't usually work as quickly as it's supposed to. Around 11:30 p.m., I took my dog out for a walk and the carpet light didn't come on, but I didn't think much of it, so I just turned my iPhone flashlight on to guide the way. After about 10 minutes of letting my dog walk around, I headed back down my driveway, noticing that the light was now on, but I figured it had just kicked on late. I went inside my house, locked the door, and walked directly to the sink to make a glass of water. I was about to walk down the hallway directly to my bedroom, but had remembered I had left my phone charger in the living room. As I turned around, I saw a tall, lanky man standing on my carpet. He was just standing there in between my parents' cars. I literally froze with fear as my back was pressed to the fridge and looked through the front door about 15 feet away, which is all glass, so it was a clear view. The man literally just stood there, as still as a statue, and a smile began to curl up his lips, and it was so fucking terrifying because he had sunglasses on, so I couldn't tell if he was looking right at me. It felt like the staring contest went on for minutes, but it was probably only 5 seconds before he bolted out of my carport and back out into the driveway. I started crying because the thought of the man with at least a foot in height on me being in the same carport hiding behind a car as I walked my dog in and opened the door to my house absolutely terrified me. My parents called the police, but they couldn't do anything because the man ran away. I am now scared shitless to take my dog out at night again. My apartment complex is a nice, well-maintained building, surrounded by beaten-down, high-crime neighborhoods. My apartment complex has gates surrounding them that can only be opened by a member or by calling a resident and having them manually let you in. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible for trespassers to find their way inside the gates. One night at about 10 or 11 p.m., I pulled into my apartment after spending some time at my fiance's house. My roommate had taken the parking spot in front of our building, so I was forced to park off to the side of the buildings in an uncovered spot. It was a short walk to the apartments, but when I got out of my car, I realized that the lights in front of my apartment building were turned off. The building directly across from the building still had their front lights on, so I had figured that the bulbs were being replaced at 11 p.m. I was lucky that the lights from the other building illuminated parts of the pathway to my apartment, but my anxiety flared up and my imagination began to run wild. I pictured masked murderers jumping out from the shadows and whisking me away to a secondary location. My keys found their way between my knuckles as I created a makeshift weapon against the creatures that go bump in the night. I was so wrapped up into my own nightmares as I power walked into my building that I didn't realize someone was standing in front of me until I was almost on top of him. His back was turned towards me and his head was down. I thought he was lighting a cigarette, and that was the reason for his strange pose. When I took a step or two closer, his head flipped around and he was staring at me as if I was a ghost. He was wide-eyed and looked like an animal caught in a trap facing a hunter. I literally jumped, but did my best to maintain my composure. My apartment complex is very small, and I have made sure to learn the faces of my neighbors. I didn't recognize this man as living in the complex, and he seemed as though he was homeless. His hair was long and unruly, and he had a beard with bits of matter clinging to his scraggly hair. His clothes were obviously worn, and he was wearing a jacket too big for him and too heavy for the Arizona weather. I continued walking, my grip tightening around my keys in my hands, just in case. I neared the staircase that led to my apartment and turned back when I felt eyes burrowing into me. The man stood where I had left a few yards away, but he had twisted his body so that his arms were frozen above his head, and one of his legs looked as though he was about to jump away. The whole contorted look made him look as though he was dancing the Running Man, but he was completely frozen, with his eyes glued to me as I moved for the stairs. We stood staring at each other. He looked like a screenshot of a 90s dancer, and I'm sure I looked like a drowned rat. I squeaked out an apology for interrupting him and ran up the stairs and into my apartment. I stood by my door, locking the peephole to see if he had followed me, one hand holding my cell with 911 ready, and the other wrapped around the baseball bat my fiancé had left me after the previous encounter at my complex. Thankfully, he didn't go up the stairs, and I was left with nothing but a bizarre story to retell. I did end up calling the apartment complex's manager, and he had informed me that the security officer was on his way to investigate. One time when I was a kid, my parents were getting ready to go on a trip for the weekend and leave me at home. I got a phone call on our home phone, and somebody asked if my mom was there, asking for her by name. Well, my name sounds very similar to my mom, so I thought they were asking for me. "This is she," I answered. Well, we didn't get very far into the conversation before I realized the mistake I made. He thought he was speaking to my mom. I should have just corrected him, but I was a bit socially awkward, so I figured I'd just end the call and never bring it up again. He then asked me if I was my husband. I told him no, he'll be away for the weekend. He then lowered his voice and told me,
"Well, I already know your mom won't be home this weekend, and I know your dad won't be either. You really shouldn't tell strangers things like that."
Then he hung up. I was petrified, but I was too scared to tell my parents because I didn't want to get in trouble for accidentally pretending to be my mom, so they left on their trip. I spent the entire weekend on edge, constantly making sure my windows and doors were locked, and keeping my dogs by my side every second, until I heard a crash in the basement. Unmistakable. There's a gate, so I know my dogs couldn't have been down there. I immediately called the police, as my parents told me to do so if I ever heard noises in the house. I waited for the police to show up, hiding in my closet, ready to wet myself from fear. The police eventually showed up after about 10 minutes, and they investigated the basement and found no sign of anything. To this day, I have no idea what happened that weekend. Whether or not the crash was a coincidence, and the man was just a family friend trying to teach me a lesson about pretending to be my mom, whether someone found their way into the house but was scared off when they heard me call the police, nothing ever came out of it. But I still shudder to think what could have happened to me that weekend. I still don't like to be alone in the house, over 10 years later. I work at a grocery store pulling carts and bagging things. It's a shitty job, but it pays the rent. I'm a 20-year-old female. I have posted about strange customers before, but this guy, he's a repeat offender. This has been going on for about 6 months. 6 months ago, I'm standing in the liquor section, dusting the bottles and making sure the display looks nice. A man about 10 or so years older than me enters the section and asks me to recommend him something. I answer honestly that I am 20 years old and therefore know nothing about alcohol. Yes, I've had it before, but I know jack shit about what's good and what isn't.
"Are you sure you're not 21?
He asked. Yeah, I'm sure.
That's a shame.
He says.
I could show you a good time if you were old enough.
And then he winks. I just kinda laughed awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Then I pretend someone needs me over in another section and scurry off. I brushed it off thinking that it'd be the last I heard from him. 2 months later, I'm picking up the slack for my sick coworker and stocking the shelves in his absence. It's about 10 at night and the store is dead quiet. I normally like these times because it gives me time to myself. I'm rearranging some cereal boxes to look nice when someone taps me on the shoulder. I jump and turn around. It's the guy. Generally, it's kind of a faux pas to touch random retail workers you don't know, but this guy didn't have a care in the world about that.
Are you 21 yet?
He asks. I shake my head no, remembering where I had seen him before. I ask him if he needs help finding anything.
No.
He says.
I just wanted to know if you were 21 yet.
And he turns and walks off without another word or without grabbing any merch from the shelves. He may have bought something later from another aisle, but I sure as hell didn't stick around to find out. 3 weeks later, I'm bagging in one of the check stands when he comes through again, posing the same question. I again answer no. And since there's a lot of people around, that's the end of it. And now, last week, I'm marking down a service walk about 7 in the morning. Basically, that means I walked to the store and made sure that there were no messes or safety issues. I'm at the customer service desk alone, and my back is turned. I hear someone clearing their throat and turn around.
Are you 21 yet?
He asks. He's staring intently, like he's trying to will me to suddenly be 21, and once again answer no. I am not 21. He scowls at me.
Are you sure?
He asks me again. Oh yes, I am quite sure. Thank you very much. Thankfully, my manager swoops in to take care of what he needed, and I get the fuck out of Dodge. I've told my managers about this dude, and they don't really seem to care. For now, he hasn't done anything but creep on me hardcore, but I worry.
Alright, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and like, share, subscribe, share on Facebook, share on Twitter, share on Instagram. I don't give a shit where you share it, just share it. Thank you for watching.